ಭಾರತ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಯುವ ಸಬಲೀಕರಣ ಮತ್ತು ಕ್ರೀಡಾ ಇಲಾಖೆಯ ಅಧೀನದಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಸರ್ವಿಸ್ ಸ್ಕೀಮ್ ಮತ್ತು ಭಾರತ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ರಕ್ಷಣಾ ಇಲಾಖೆಯ ಅಧೀನದಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಕೆಡೆಟ್ ಕಾರ್ಪ್ಸ್ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು ಎರಡು ಯುವಕರಿಗಾಗಿ ಇರತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳು. ಇದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ನೆಹರು ಯುವ ಕೇಂದ್ರ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು NYK ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು ಅದು ಕೂಡ ಯುವಕರಿಗಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ. ಭಾರತ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಯುವ ಸಬಲೀಕರಣ ಮತ್ತು ಕ್ರೀಡಾ ಇಲಾಖೆ, ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಘನ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಯುವ ಸಬಲೀಕರಣ ಮತ್ತು ಕ್ರೀಡಾ ಇಲಾಖೆ ಈ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳು ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಸೇವಾ ಯೋಜನೆಯನ್ನು ಮುನ್ನಡೆಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ. 1969 ಸೆಪ್ಟೆಂಬರ್ 24ನೇ ತಾರೀಕಿಗೆ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ NSS ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರಪಿತ ಮಹಾತ್ಮ ಗಾಂಧೀಜಿಯವರ ಜನ್ಮ ಶತಮಾನೋತ್ಸವದ ವರ್ಷದ ಸವಿನೆನಪಿಗಾಗಿ ಹುಟ್ಟಿಕೊಂಡಿತು. ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಸೇವಾ ಯೋಜನೆ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಉದ್ದೇಶವೇ ಯುವಕರನ್ನ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರ ಸೇವೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ತೊಡಗಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು, ಅವರನ್ನ ಸಮುದಾಯದ ಸೇವೆಗೆ ಸದೃಢನಾಗಿ ಸಿದ್ಧಗೊಳಿಸ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು, ಅವರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾಯಕತ್ವ ಗುಣಗಳನ್ನು ಬೆಳೆಸುವಂಥದ್ದು ಮತ್ತು ಶ್ರಮದ ಮಹತ್ವವನ್ನ ಅವರು ಅರಿತುಕೊಂಡು ಅವರು ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರದ ಸೇವೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ತಮ್ಮನ್ನು ತಾವು ತೊಡಗಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಾಯಕತ್ವ ಗುಣಗಳಾಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿತ್ವ ವಿಕಸನ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಹೀಗೆ ಹಲವು ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳನ್ನ ಸನ್ನದ್ಧಗೊಳಿಸ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಮಹತ್ವದ ಯೋಜನೆಯಾಗಿ ಭಾರತ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಇದನ್ನ ಅನುಷ್ಠಾನಕ್ಕೆ ತಂತು. ಆ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಇವತ್ತು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯ ಬಹಳ ಮುಂಚೂಣಿಯಲ್ಲಿದ್ದುಕೊಂಡು NSS ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾರ್ಯವನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಉತ್ತರ ಕನ್ನಡ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆ, ಧಾರವಾಡ, ಗದಗ, ಹಾವೇರಿ ಈ 4 ಜಿಲ್ಲೆಗಳ ವ್ಯಾಪ್ತಿಯನ್ನು ಒಳಗೊಂಡಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯ 21,000 NSS ಸ್ವಯಂ ಸೇವಕರನ್ನ ಹೊಂದಿದೆ. ರಾಜ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ 2ನೇ ಅತಿ ದೊಡ್ಡ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯ NSS ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು. ನಾವು NSS ದಲ್ಲಿ ಹಲವಾರು ರಚನಾತ್ಮಕ ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಗಳನ್ನ ಹಮ್ಮಿಕೊಳ್ತಿರ್ತೀವಿ ಸ್ವಯಂ ಸೇವಕರ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿತ್ವ ವಿಕಸನಕ್ಕಾಗಿ. NSS ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ಯುವಕರಲ್ಲಿ ಓದುವುದರ ಜೊತೆಗೇನೆ ಅವರು ಈ ಪಠ್ಯೇತರ ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ತಮ್ಮನ್ನು ತಾವು ತೊಡಗಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ಳಬೇಕು, ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಾ ಕರಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಆಕ್ಟಿವಿಟೀಸ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದು ಕಲ್ಚರಲ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, NCC ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, NSS ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಜಿಮ್ಖಾನಾ ಆಕ್ಟಿವಿಟೀಸ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವೇನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಈ ಎಲ್ಲ ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ತಮ್ಮನ್ನು ತಾವು ತೊಡಗಿಸಿಕೊಂಡು ನಾವು ಈ ಸಮಾಜದಲ್ಲಿ ಹುಟ್ಟಿದೇವಿ, ಸಮಾಜಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವೇನು ಕೊಡಬೇಕು, ನಮಗೆ ಸಮಾಜ ಉತ್ತಮವಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ವಿದ್ಯೆಯನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಇಂಥ ಪ್ರತಿಷ್ಠಿತ ಶೈಕ್ಷಣಿಕ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳ ಮೂಲಕ. ನಾವು ಈ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗೆ ಏನು ಕೊಡಬಲ್ಲೆವು, ಸಮಾಜಕ್ಕೆ ನಮ್ಮಿಂದ ಆಗ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಸಹಾಯ ಏನು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಈ NSS ವಾರ್ಷಿಕ ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಗಳು ಏನಿದಾವೆ, ವರ್ಷದುದ್ದಕ್ಕೂ ನಡೀತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅದು ಶ್ರಮದಾನ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ವಿಶೇಷ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸಗಳಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಮತ್ತೆ ಸಾಂಸ್ಕೃತಿಕ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳಿರ್ಬೋದು, ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿತ್ವ ವಿಕಸನಕ್ಕೆ ಪೂರಕವಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಪ್ರತಿಭಾವಂತ ಸಂಪನ್ಮೂಲ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳನ್ನ ಕರೆಸಿ ಅವರೊಂದಿಗೆ ಸಂವಾದ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಹೀಗೆ ಹಲವಾರು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರ ಮೂಲಕ NSS ಯುವಕರನ್ನ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರ ನಿರ್ಮಾಣ ಕಾರ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ತೊಡಗಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ತದೆ. ಜೊತೆಗೆ ನಾವು ಇವತ್ತು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ, ಈ ಒಂದು COVID-19 ಕೊರೋನಾ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಮಹಾಮಾರಿ ನಾವು ಆವರಿಸಿಕೊಂಡಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಈ ಒಂದು ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊರೋನಾ ವಾರಿಯರ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿ ಇವತ್ತು NSS ಸ್ವಯಂ ಸೇವಕರು, NSS ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳು, ಜಿಲ್ಲಾ ನೋಡಲ್ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳು, ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಉತ್ತರ ಕನ್ನಡ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳ ಇವತ್ತು ಅತಿವೃಷ್ಟಿಯಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ NSS ಮಕ್ಕಳು, NSS ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳು, ನೋಡಲ್ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳು ಬಹಳ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಶ್ರಮದಾನದ ಮೂಲಕ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಮಾಸ್ಕ್ ವಿತರಣೆ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ, ಮತ್ತೆ ರೇಷನ್ ಸಾಮಗ್ರಿಗಳನ್ನ ವಿತರಿಸ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ, ಜಾಗೃತಿಯನ್ನು ಮೂಡಿಸ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಇವತ್ತು NSS ಮಕ್ಕಳು, ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳು, ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಇಂಥ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ AV ಬಾಳಿಗ ಕಾಲೇಜ್ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರತಿಷ್ಠಿತ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳು ತಮ್ಮನ್ನು ತಾವು ಸಕ್ರಿಯವಾಗಿ ಸಾಮಾಜಿಕ ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ತೊಡಗಿಸಿಕೊಂಡು ಮುಂಚೂಣಿಯಲ್ಲಿದ್ದುಕೊಂಡು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನಮಗೆ ಸಂತೋಷವಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯ ವ್ಯಾಪ್ತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಅನೇಕ ಮಹಾವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು 209 ಕಾಲೇಜುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಇವತ್ತು NSS ಘಟಕ ಇದೆ. 21,000 ಸ್ವಯಂ ಸೇವಕರಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರೆಲ್ಲರಲ್ಲೂ ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಉತ್ತರ ಕನ್ನಡ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆ ಬಹಳ ವಿಶಿಷ್ಟವಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆ. ಇದು ಮುಖಸ್ತುತಿ ಅಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು, ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಬಹಳ ಕ್ರಿಯಾಶೀಲವಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ನೋಡಲ್ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳು ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ GT ಭಟ್ ಸರ್ನ ಹೊಂದಿರತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆ, ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಕ್ರಿಯಾಶೀಲವಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳನ್ನು ಹೊಂದಿರತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆ. ನಾವು NIC ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಇಂಟಿಗ್ರೇಷನ್ ಕ್ಯಾಂಪ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಸಾಹಸ ಶಿಬಿರಗಳಿಗೆ, ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಯೂತ್ ಫೆಸ್ಟಿವಲ್, ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಯೂತ್ ಫೆಸ್ಟಿವಲ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ವಾಲಂಟಿಯರ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನ ಸೆಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಕಳಿಸ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಬಾಳಿಗ ಕಾಲೇಜಿಗೆ ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಯಾಕೆ ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರತಿಭಾವಂತ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಸ್ವಯಂ ಸೇವಕರಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಪ್ರಾಚಾರ್ಯರು ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಯುವ ಜನತೆಗೆ ಪೂರಕವಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಲೈಫ್ ಸ್ಕಿಲ್ಸ್ ಎಷ್ಟು ಅವರಿಗೆ ಪೂರಕವಾಗಿವೆ. NSS ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು ವಿವಿಧ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಜೀವನ ಕೌಶಲ್ಯಗಳನ್ನ ತಿಳಿಸ್ಕೊಡ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು. ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸಗಳ ಮೂಲಕ, ಸಂಪನ್ಮೂಲ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳನ್ನ ಕರೆಸಿ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಶ್ರಮದಾನದ ಮೂಲಕ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಸ್ವಯಂ ಸೇವಕರಿಗೆ ಅವಕಾಶವನ್ನ ಕೊಡುವುದರ ಮೂಲಕ ಅನೇಕ ಅವಕಾಶಗಳನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಅತ್ಯುತ್ತಮ ವೇದಿಕೆ NSS. ಒಂದು ಬೆಸ್ಟ್ ಪ್ಲಾಟ್ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಫಾರ್ ಬಿಲ್ಡ್ ಲೀಡರ್ಶಿಪ್ ಕ್ವಾಲಿಟೀಸ್ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು. ಜೊತೆಗೆ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಲೈಫ್ ಸ್ಕಿಲ್ ಅನ್ನ ಡೆವಲಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಬೆಸ್ಟ್ ಪ್ಲಾಟ್ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಇದು ನಮ್ಮ NSS ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು. ಆ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಇವತ್ತು NSS NCC ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿಗಾಗಿನೇ ಹಮ್ಮಿಕೊಂಡಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಯಶಸ್ವಿ ಆಗ್ಲಿ ಮತ್ತು ಸಂಪನ್ಮೂಲ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳು ಹೆಚ್ಚೆಚ್ಚು ಇದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಬೆಳಕನ್ನ ಚೆಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ, ಮತ್ತು ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ನಾನು ಬಹಳ ಸಂತೋಷದಿಂದ ಉದ್ಘಾಟನೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಭವಿಷ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಥ ಹಲವಾರು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳನ್ನ ಈ ಒಂದು ಮಹಾವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯ, ಈ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರತಿಷ್ಠಿತ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ಹಮ್ಮಿಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂತಾಗ್ಲಿ. ಇಂಥ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹಳ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥಿತವಾಗಿ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮೆಟಿಕ್ ಆಗಿ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲ ಆಡಳಿತ ಮಂಡಳಿಯ ಗೌರವಾನ್ವಿತ ಸದಸ್ಯರಿಗೆ, ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷರಿಗೆ, ಪದಾಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ಸನ್ಮಾನ್ಯ ಪ್ರಾಚಾರ್ಯರಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ಆರ್ಗನೈಸಿಂಗ್ ಸೆಕ್ರೆಟರೀಸ್, ಸಂಘಟನಾ ಕಾರ್ಯದರ್ಶಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಾನು ವಂದನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತಾ, NSS ಮತ್ತು NCCಗೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಉಪಯುಕ್ತವಾಗ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಆಗ್ಲಿ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ನನ್ನ ಉದ್ಘಾಟನಾ ಪರ ಮಾತುಗಳನ್ನ ಮುಗಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು.
Heart is too small, but feelings are too big. Brain is little smaller, but thoughts are as big as sky. Feel like innocent, but think like master. Sir, really thankful to your precious words.
Thank you.
Now I request NSS volunteer of our college, Mr. Prasanna Desai, to introduce invited speaker, Mr. Yatish Hegde. Over to you.
Hello, good morning everyone. I am Prasanna Desai, NSS volunteer. Today I am pleasure to introduce Yatish Hegde sir. Yatish Hegde is a faculty in A.B. Freeman School of Business at Fulham University. Yatish completed his BE in Computer Science from R.V. College of Engineering in 2005. After completing his engineering, Yatish worked as a software engineer for a US-based telecommunication software company in Bangalore for 2 years. Yatish moved to the US in 2008 to pursue graduate studies. Yatish received his MS in Information Management from Syracuse University in 2010. He also earned a certificate of advanced studies in data science from Syracuse University. Since 2011 until June 2020, Yatish has worked as a research analyst for Syracuse University and led information system development for grant-funded research projects in the Center for Computational Data Science. During his tenure in Syracuse University, he has led the development of several teaching and research applications and contributed to research publication to advise research in the information science field. He also served as an adjunct professor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Prasanna Desai. Now I request Mr. Yatish Hegde, Tulane University, New Orleans, USA, to speak on the topic exploring resources for effective teaching and research. Over to you, sir.
Just give me a second. Let me adjust. Hello and thank you. It's my honor to be part of this event today, organized by NSS and NCC unit of Dr. A.V. Balika College of Arts and Science. I hope you are able to see my screen and you have no problem hearing my voice. If you have ever wondered what I'm going to talk today, you're not alone. I was wondering about that too. The topic is too broad. My intention is to give you some examples of how research is done in universities across US and Europe and what resources are available to them. I'm also going to be talking about how universities in US are making use of technology in the classrooms and teaching. These resources may not help you directly in your teaching and research today, but it should give you a broader experience in terms of what you should do next in your teaching and research or in your organization. I hope you'll be able to connect the dots and take home something with you by the end of the talk today. Before I head to the next slide, I have to tell you something very important. I'm not an expert in this topic, so please take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm primarily a software engineer and a data scientist. I happen to work with many researchers for a long time, helping build systems for them. I'm now trying to bring my professional work experience into teaching. So if you start looking at your research and resources you need for your research, you need money. So that's your main resource. And there are several grants and awards and funding opportunities which bring money to your research. And that depends on R&D expenditure of governments and companies and funding organizations. Let's also look at the other resources that you need for your research. People, if you are not alone in your research project, you need other people to help you in your research projects. Knowledge across disciplines, which is also very important. Many good research projects actually happen when there is a collaboration between experts working in different disciplines. Literature is actually a previous research work that is done in the similar field that you're going to go through and find out what they have done and how that's applicable to your research. So let's take a close look at R&D expenditure by country. And I'm going to give you a chart that shows you R&D expenditure by different countries in the US, in Asia, and in Europe. And you may not be able to see all the countries here, but take a closer look at it. You'll be able to find India there, down at the bottom. You'll also be able to find China and the United States. I'm sorry, I can hear someone talking. Is everybody muted? Okay. So, hello? Okay. Down at the bottom, you see India is spending around 0.7% of GDP. And you see United States and some countries like Japan and Korea, which are spending over 3% or nearly 3% or more GDP on their research and development. You can also see number of researchers per million inhabitants. And if you look at United States, Japan, or Korea, they have over 4,000 researchers working in the research projects per million inhabitants. So the size of the circle that you see for each of those countries, they are actually the research money they have got in terms of billions of dollars. So, so if you look at India, China is a little bigger in terms of circle compared to India, but you should also see that India and China are countries with bigger population. So if you look at the research spending per head, it's not going to be a lot. So let me move to the next screen and take a look at some of these countries in detail. For example, the United States spend 2.7% of their GDP on research projects, and 500 billion is what's the exact, nearly the exact amount that they're going to spend on research every year. And down at the bottom, you see in different sectors. For example, in the US, you have businesses spending around $340 billion for research and development. You have government that's spending $54, and then you have universities spending $62 billion. So if you look at the resources that are available to you in the US as a researcher, you can count both the government and the universities if you are in the academia, right? So that's going to be about $100 billion or more. You can also include private or nonprofit associations, which are spending about $19 billion. So that's a lot of money, and that's the resources, kind of resources that are available in the US. And if you look at Germany, that's also about 2.9% of GDP, which is a bit higher than US. But and again, the government and the universities have got a lot of money to spend on research. So that's a lot of resource if you talk about research needed for resources needed for your research. Then if you look at India in detail, you have 0.7% of GDP, which is only about $51 billion for research. And down at the bottom, you'll see that private, nonprofit, and universities almost have nothing to spend on research. So, and universities in India, if I'm not wrong, there are affiliated colleges, and it's not actually one university. It's so universities that you see there and the private nonprofit are probably, in my opinion, I think those are the affiliated colleges which probably have no money to spend on research. So this is actually a big problem in terms of research spending, and that's one of the big issues in India right now. Now let's talk about the research idea. So if you have a research idea and you want to turn your research idea into a research project. So, so one of the resources that you need is money, and that's what we have seen so far. So if you have a research idea, what are you going to do to convert that into a project? So I have chosen an example that's probably very close to the biggest, probably the biggest expenditure US has ever done in terms of research. And let me choose that example, and then let's see if we can connect the dots and find out how research is done in the US, and then how probably other countries can adopt similar things in their countries. So this is a research project about gravitational wave. And I'm not sure how many of you know about gravitational wave, but I'm not going to go into the details of the gravitational wave here. But the idea is that when you have an idea, research idea, how do you actually convert that into a project, and how do you actually bring money to fund that project? So Albert Einstein long ago proved theoretically that two big massive bodies in the universe, you see that in the picture, I hope you can see, these two bodies in the universe, they are very massive bodies. They come into contact with each other in some fashion, right? And they generate a wave, and that wave has got some energy, and it's called gravitational wave, and I think it's called gravitational radiation. The energy itself is called gravitational radiation. I'm not a physicist, so I don't get into the details of the gravitational wave itself. But the theory that Albert Einstein proved was only a theory until very recently. So the physicists around the globe, mainly from US and Europe, they came together. They wanted to detect this gravitational wave. And because Einstein has already proven theoretically, but they want to detect. But detecting gravitational waves very, very hard. It's almost impossible because even though it is generated by two massive bodies in the universe, the energy carried by a gravitational wave is too small. Technically speaking, gravitational wave can be generated by two people coming into contact with each other. But that will be almost impossible to detect. So what this physicist did was they came together and they wanted to bring this research idea into, convert that into a project. So how do you detect such a small scale energy? They had an idea. So, but then the idea costs billions of dollars. National Science Foundation, which is one of the research funding agencies in the US, they've been thinking about this for a while, and they finally funded this project. Let's take a look at the small video. Because I'm not a physicist, I'm not going to try to explain. And there is a video which explains this gravitational wave in a better fashion. Let me play this video. Hope you can hear it.
What is a gravitational wave? It's a ripple in the fabric of space and time. Imagine that space is a giant sheet of rubber. Things that have mass cause that rubber sheet to bend, like a bowling ball on a trampoline. The more mass, the more that space gets bent and distorted by gravity. For example, the reason the Earth goes around the Sun is that the Sun is very massive, causing a big distortion of the space around it. If you just try to move in a straight line around such a big distortion, you will find yourself actually moving in a circle. That's how orbits work. There's not an actual force pulling the planets around, just a bending of the space. Gravitational waves are produced whenever masses accelerate, changing the distortion of space. Everything with mass and/or energy can make gravitational waves. If you and I started to dance around each other, we would also cause ripples in the fabric of space and time, but these would be extremely small, practically undetectable. Now, gravity is very weak in the scale of other forces in the universe, so you need something really, really massive moving very, very fast to make the big ripples that we can detect. How would you observe a ripple in space? If the space between you and me stretched or compressed, we wouldn't notice it if we had made marks on our metaphorical rubber sheet, for example, using equally spaced rocks, because these marks would also get stretched further apart. But there is one ruler that doesn't get stretched, one made using the speed of light. If the space between 2 points gets stretched, then light will take longer to go from one point to the other. And if the space gets squeezed, light takes less time to cross the 2 points. This is where the LIGO experiment comes in. It has 4-kilometer-long tunnels and uses lasers to measure the changes in the distance between the ends of the tunnels. When a gravitational wave comes through, it stretches space in one direction and squeezes space in the other direction. By measuring the interference of the lasers as they bounce between the different points, physicists can measure very precisely whether the space in between has stretched or compressed. And the precision needed is incredible. To detect a gravitational wave, you need to be able to tell when something changes in length by a few parts in 10 to the 23. It's like being able to tell that a stick 1 sextillion meters has shrunk by 5 millimeters. The effect of a gravitational wave is so minuscule and easily confused with random noise, you need a smart data analysis technique. Scientists hope to identify the patterns of gravitational waves by comparing the wiggles they measure in the experiment to the wiggles they expect from the gravitational waves. That's like trying to identify a song being hummed at a noisy party. A very, very noisy party. Imagine your whole life you had been deaf until one day your hearing was restored. You'd be able to explore the universe in this whole new way. That's why detecting gravitational waves is so significant. It's a completely new way of studying the universe. Anytime there's a new way to investigate the universe, we discover things we didn't expect. It's really about looking for new things we didn't know existed, examining the extreme edges of our knowledge of physics, and testing our theories about how the universe works.
So were you able to hear the voice? Do this if you are able to hear the voice.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So the idea was that, so NSF, which is the funding agency, put in $1 billion to construct this 4-kilometer by 4-kilometer arm, which is not just a tube, which is actually a vacuum tube, to construct this LIGO observatory, which is at 2 places in the US. So that means they have constructed 2 of this in the US, and there's actually a third one in Europe, which is actually costing more than $1 billion for each of them, I think. So it's a bit risky project because they don't know whether they're able to detect the gravitational wave, whether, because most of the waves that these observatories detect are noises, because from the traffic, from other places, when people talking and so on. So let's take a look at, so when they are detecting this kind of waves using these observatories, as I said, they've been detecting all kinds of waves, and they have to compare all kinds of waves detected by all 3 observatories to find out if there exists a gravitational wave in the data that they're collecting. So it's quite hard. So finally, so you have a LIGO observatory, you have everything that you wanted. So I invested $1 billion, so now what? So the data that you're collecting is terabytes of data, and that's the terabytes of data, I think, probably every day. And you're gonna need computers to process those data. You're gonna need physicists who are going to write code to detect those waves. You have massive storage because you need to store those terabytes of data. And you have to identify noise. That means you have to write a pipeline. You need lots of computer scientists who can actually do that job. So this created more opportunities. And of course, NSF kept spending more money into this research because it was giving lots and lots of opportunities for young scientists who are into this gravitational wave research. And also people came across other disciplines and participated in this research. So as a result, and the researchers, the physicists, were able to find a gravitational wave finally in 2016. And they found out 2 black holes, I think the black holes at 1.3 billion light years away. So, and then 3 physicists who were actually working on this gravitational wave, they got Nobel Prize. So the idea here is that when you have research funding, and when there are agencies which are able to spend so much money and fund research projects, you can achieve such things. But there's a risk when you do such things. So let's try to see what they are doing now in terms of doing more research in gravitational wave. So gravitational wave because they found black holes, they are able to find other events that are occurring in the universe right now. So they are doing more research in terms of finding more events in the universe, and more people and experts in the field are joining gravitational wave research and it has created multiple opportunities. So you can see that I have posted some pictures of different kinds of awards that the National Science Foundation has created for gravitational wave research, which are not just for detecting the waves, because the wave detection is almost done, but there are research ideas which are useful in terms of figuring out and classifying those waves and figuring out better infrastructure to deal with the pipeline and so on. So the gravitational wave, like I said, it's not just for physicists. It created opportunities for computer scientists, because computer scientists are needed to manage those resources, because you need massive computer storage. And you also need metadata researchers who are working on this gravitational wave science to study workflows. You also need data scientists to do data mining in gravitational wave and find and use machine learning technologies to identify different patterns in the data. And you also see social scientists and citizen scientist researchers who are working in with gravitational wave researchers to crowdsource and do human annotations of the data. So let's try connecting the dots here again. So this kind of research is possible in the universities because university consists of multiple departments, and they all work together in a multidisciplinary research setting. So access to experts and research scientists in different areas is quite possible when you have such a setting, and when your flexible teaching and research duties allow you to do such things. So, and also when you have a research setting like you have in the universities here, you also have other help that you get, such as grant writing and awards writing. And you also have top class infrastructure, which is, for example, Amazon EC2 like cloud that are available in the universities. So universities don't have to go to Amazon or Google or Microsoft in terms of obtaining computer resources. And the other things that you have to look at, how the other resources that are helpful for this kind of research study. Actually, setup is actually helping researchers achieving such a miracle. You can see that a university consists of academic departments, one arts and science college, one engineering department, one business school, one medical school, and one school of communication, and so on. And they all reside in one campus or in a very close proximity. And they have a very good structure in terms of governing. They have lots and lots of libraries, and the libraries are equipped with resources that are helpful for researchers, whether it's computing resources or whether it's ebooks that you can log in and study. There are dark webs which are accessible through libraries. These are very important resources for researchers. Then you also can see that there are operational departments in the universities which are also playing very important role, such as the information technology department, which has got a full software company scale staff, right? So they can help you in writing programs or software that are required for your research. They can also bring technology to your classrooms. Then you have human resources department. Then you have Office of Funded Research, which are basically the department that takes care of your funded research in terms of grant support and in terms of finding new opportunities for you in terms of doing research. Then you have research computing, which are the core department for providing computing resources in terms of whether you need supercomputers for your research, whether you need computer cluster for parallel computing, and so on. So this structure is also very helpful, and knowing the structure, you can imagine that research study is going to be easier than settings you probably have seen in your universities or so on. So let me talk about another resource for researchers, which is software. So software is a tool for research. Don't imagine software is for programmers. So a lot of the researchers in the US use software in some fashion, whether it's writing some small programs. They are not professionally trained software engineers, but they do write programs because software is their best friend. Imagine that you have to tighten a screw in your house. You're not going to call a carpenter to do it. You have a screwdriver and you know which screw is, you have to tighten it up, and you're going to do it on your own. So software is not a programmer's friend, it's also a researcher's friend. So you have to use software in some ways to yield better results in your research. So there are a lot of open source softwares, which I'm going to talk about, I think, later slides, which are accessible and available to all kinds of disciplines. It's not just for people who are working on technology or computer science. You might be a researcher in archaeology, or you might be a researcher in, you might be a historian, you might be a biologist. You would need software to do your research. So don't ignore software as your resource. I'm going to point out some resources, if you want to note down, which are currently in trend in terms of helping researchers to do a couple of things. Of course, you have to do some programming to do this kind of research, but I think these resources are free and available for you to download or use it online. That is called Jupyter Notebook and Google Colab. So Jupyter Notebook is a notebook that's used by researchers and data scientists. You can program in different kinds of languages. I'm not asking you to do a lot of programming here, but if you want to do some research and you take a look at some examples of how, for example, if you are a biologist and you want to do some gene study, you have plenty of resources online, and there are plenty of materials available online, and they tell you how to use Jupyter Notebooks for your research. And your idea is not to learn programming, your idea is to do research. So you will find plenty of resources and you can probably reuse them. The Google Colab is another notebook kind of a tool. So if you're not able to install and use Jupyter Notebooks, you can actually make use of Google Colab, but there are limitations on Google Colab. It is not completely open source. And there are also limitations in terms of what software you can use. Let's talk about, let's go back and talk about research awards a little bit, because we saw that money is very important for research, and how to get funding for your research is also a very important topic. So National Science Foundation in the US funds all kinds of programs in research. So there shouldn't be a topic that you won't find in National Science Foundation website. So if you have a research idea, you will go there and find a related topic and then awards available in that topic. You will also have opportunities in terms of if you're in studies other than science, you're probably a historian. You want to work on some kind of digital aspects of library science or something. Then you have Institute of Museum and Library Services, which also funds big projects. Then you have NIH, which funds if you have an idea in biology or medical field, they have got lots and lots of funds to give it to you. But remember that all this require some credibility. So you can actually apply for these kind of funds. And good thing is that you don't have to be in the US to apply for many of these research projects and awards. You can actually be anywhere, but you need to have credibility. So I'm going to come to that credibility part in my next or the following slide. But before I go there, I'm also going to talk about some research awards, which are actually funded by big companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, or Google. So I have some URLs there if you want to copy, and you can actually Google and you can find the same thing. So you're gonna Google research awards from Amazon or Microsoft or Facebook. You're gonna get these links, and they have different areas where they fund. So you don't have to be a technologist or a computer scientist. For example, Facebook actually funds all kinds of research in social science. So they have different opportunities at different time. So you have to be keeping an eye on which research projects you are interested in. And when opportunities come up, you have to apply. So I know Facebook recently funded WhatsApp researchers in India. I think a team in India got some funding for WhatsApp research. So, so it's not just the government agencies, it's also some private agencies and big corporations. They have money to give it to researchers. So now coming to the last part. So I have a research idea and I want to turn that into a project. So can I get this funding? Even though NSF and Institute of Museum and Libraries and National Institute of Health, they all together have billions of dollars to fund research. Can I get those funds? Yes and no. So establishing credibility is the first part in terms of applying for research funding, which is, so you have to have publications in your research field because that gives you credibility in terms of how good a researcher you are. You also need to have the publications or at least have presented in top international conferences in your field. I think it's a little bit out of scope to talk about international conferences in all fields right now, but you can find this over the internet. There are popular international conferences in each of your research areas, and if you write a paper and try to apply and you are able to present it, you can actually get, that's how you get your credibility. And then do a lot of literature review in your research area. So you want to be current in your knowledge. You can't be looking at what people have done 10 years ago that may be outdated right now. So in terms of literature review, go to Google Scholar. I know Google Scholar doesn't give you access to all kinds of research papers, but then there is a dark web, which is also you need a login to access, or these kind of services are paid in some fashion. So you need some kind of access through libraries. I know some libraries in the US, almost all university libraries have access to this kind of dark web, which gives you access to all kinds of research papers that are published in journals and conferences. But to give you a good start, go through Google Scholar and then put keywords in your research area, and then you will be able to find latest research papers, and then you can start from there. So I hope that was helpful. And then let's move on to some of the teaching resources. So I have a little bit of time to talk about this, and let's see if I can get through that. In terms of effective teaching, I'm not a good teacher. I'm just starting to teach, and I'm probably not an expert here, but there are some points that I've made may be helpful to you. So in terms of teaching, so you have to be aggressive in terms of changing the syllabus to match current trends. So if you are teaching, if your syllabus making takes 2 years, and then implementing the syllabus takes another 2 years, it is 4 years, and it might be outdated by the time the students start to learn. So aggressive changing the syllabus is actually very helpful in terms of matching the current trends. Adopting new technologies in classrooms, of course, this requires money, and you won't be able to do it immediately, but this is something to keep in mind. What kinds of technologies will actually help in classrooms? Technologies alone does not help teaching methods, or does not improve teaching, but it can give you a good leverage in terms of adapting to new technologies and to new trends. And imagine that students are your clients. So when you are teaching, change your teaching method to adapt to the students' mindset and thinking. So they are your clients. They are not your students. Imagine that they are clients. So also try to bring industry experts to academia and to the classrooms, which could be a bit challenging, given that there is some kind of distance between academia and industry in India, but it's also possible if you try hard, you can bring industry experts to academia. It may not be through a permanent position, but it could be like a guest speaker. So students actually get an opportunity about what they're going to do when they go to the industry. And when someone from the industry come and talk to the students, they're going to get a better perspective and exposure. Use learning management systems. So learning management systems, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in the next slides. There are a few learning management systems which almost all universities in the US use, which are going to be helpful in terms of managing your students, posting lectures, assignments, and managing all the things that you do in your classroom. And then try to give open book exams. So this could be beyond what you can think of in India right now, but I think if I'm not wrong, some places are already adopting this, and this is a good way to stimulate students' thinking. So classroom technology, I was just talking about classroom technology, and this requires money, and is not something that I'm going to insist, but it's something to keep in mind. So how this new technology is going to help in effective teaching. You may have experienced now because of the pandemic that students are attending online classes, and this kind of happened because of a force. And coronavirus was a force, but otherwise you wouldn't have seen this so soon. But in the universities in the US, they have had this technology for a long time. So the teachers who are in the classroom can actually record their lectures. They have multiple screens, they have multiple cameras, which records the lecture, and then the blackboard they use is kind of a smart blackboard, which also records what you write on in a blackboard. So there are different kinds of technologies that you can use in the classroom, which is also something to think about, but you need money to actually implement those. So let me go to my next topic, which is the learning management system. So learning management system is, like I said, is something that almost all universities in the US use to manage classrooms, which is like you can see from the screen here. So this is one of the classes, and you can see from to the top, you have grades, you have pages, you have assignments, you have discussions, you have modules, and then you have assignments. So all of these are for one class that you're going to teach. And this is helpful because you, as an instructor, you can post your lecture in a module, and you can make better use of your classroom time in terms of activities. So this is adapting to the new age, which is instead of wasting time doing the lecturing in class, you actually do the lecture at home and post the video onto this learning management system. When students actually come to the class, you can actually get a feedback. You can try new activities in terms of strengthening their learning, whether it's through group activities or individual activities. You can also give students a heads up before they come to the class by posting an announcement. And some of these learning management systems are actually paid, and I'm not sure if this is still open for free access. So, so I don't guarantee that this will be accessible to you right now, even though you want to adopt, but this may not cost you much if you want to do it. But this saves a lot of time, and you will actually be ahead of your peers if you try to use it. And the other uses of using these kind of learning management systems is actually you have you also get a good summary of how your students are doing. Suppose you post a quiz, and the quizzes are, if they are multiple choice, they are automatically graded. You can quickly see how your students are doing in terms of their average score, or what's the median, and so on. And if you are a student, you also get a heads up about what is due today, and what classes and what assignments are due today, and what's coming up next. So that's also an important thing in terms of managing your schedule. So you have a calendar, you have your inbox, so you can write emails to your instructor and so on. So these are all managed online, and this is probably the right time because of the pandemic to adapt to one of these things right now in your classroom. I have about 2 minutes. So when I talked about making lecture videos, I have a few more things to share in terms of resources. So uja.com is one of the places where you can create very interesting videos, which also, which is not just a lecture, but you can also incorporate your quizzes along with the video. So you can teach for 5 minutes and then ask questions to the students, give them feedback, or get their responses, and you can view it later. So this is a very good way of making a lecture video at home and then post it online into a learning management system. And go take a look at uja.com. You should be able to get some free trial and try it out. That's going to be one of the resources if you want to make use of new technologies in your teaching. So I had like 2 videos here, which is quite long to play right now because I'm almost at the end, but I'm going to show you quickly. We may not get to the end, but I will be able to show very quickly, and you will see the effectiveness of making videos. So with this new technology, how teaching can be effective if you can make use of some animations and so on. So I'm going to play a video of an expert who talks about blockchain. Don't worry about blockchain at this point, but this is just to give you an example.
Good morning. Today we're going to speak terms. Bitcoin and blockchain. Bitcoin is a digital coin. It's money which is digital. We're not going to talk about this about Bitcoin. Maybe because it has bad reputation, but about blockchain we should and can talk. Okay, so after we understood the basic terms of Japan, this is typically done using a third trusted party. And it is typically works as follows. First of all, they say, I want to move to solve is first to do the transfer money without the trusted entity.
Okay, you saw in that video, I didn't play it full. There's no time to play the full video, but you can see that he is an expert in blockchain and he's actually trying very hard to explain blockchain. That's probably the best you can get in terms of explaining, but with the Blackboard and in classroom, that's how much you can do. But I'm gonna play a video now with this technology and with some animations, how you can explain blockchain in a short period of time. And of course, this is complicated, so you're not going to get everything right now. If you don't know about blockchain, I'm not going to play the entire video.
Blockchains are incredibly popular nowadays. But what is a blockchain? How do they work? What problems do they solve? And how can they be used? Like the name indicates, a blockchain is a chain of blocks that contains information. This technique was originally described in 1991 by a group of researchers and was originally intended to timestamp digital documents so that it's not possible to backdate them or to tamper with them. In 2009 to create the digital cryptocurrency Bitcoin. Now, a blockchain is a distributed ledger that is completely open to anyone. They have an interesting property. Once some data has been recorded inside a blockchain, it becomes very difficult to change it. So how does that work? Well, let's take a closer look at a block. Each block contains some data, the hash of the block, and the hash of the previous block. The data that is stored inside a block depends on the type of blockchain. The Bitcoin blockchain, for example, stores the details about a transaction in here, such as the sender, receiver, and the amount of coins. A block also has a hash. You can compare a hash to a fingerprint. It identifies a block and all of its contents.
Okay, you get an idea of what that is. So it's much better than someone trying to explain in a classroom setting because these technologies help. Because when you as a student see these pictures and animations, some things are very complicated to understand in a classroom setting with just a Blackboard. As a teacher, even though you are an expert, these things actually take you too far in terms of using these resources like this kind of videos in your classroom. Sorry, I'm trying to go to the next screen. So, so it's kind of go back right now and then say, okay, I don't have resources. I don't have money to buy this kind of technology right now because we need money in our organization to fund these kinds of things. So what else I can do as a teacher to organize my class? So I may not be able to do this learning management system, which is too advanced right now, and we may not have money to buy this. We may not be able to use tool like Yuja, which is also okay. So so there's some distraction there, sorry. So what you can do as a teacher in terms of making use of other resources that are easily available to you. So make use of tools like Google Drive. So as a teacher, you can actually make Google Drive folders and then organize your class, share your files with students. You can also use Slack. Slack is a communication channel as a platform. You can make Slack channels and communicate with your students and create online discussions. Slack also is a bit more advanced in terms of chatting software. You can set reminders. It understands the human language to some extent. You can also use Trello to manage your students and their to-do lists. So Trello is like a Kanban, very advanced Kanban kind of board. But you can make lists like multiple lists. You can name it. When I say Kanban, it's like 3 kinds of lists, which is like to do, in progress, and completed. You can make these kinds of lists and share it with your students. And that's going to be very helpful in terms of managing students and their assignments. And then you can also start using emails to communicate effectively with your students. These are all the small things that you can do even without the help of the advanced technology like learning management systems. Even though you don't have funding to do funding for those kinds of systems, you can still use these resources or maybe start using these resources in your classrooms. So that might be your next step if you haven't done this already. So what kind of other funding resources, funding agencies are there to help you in your teaching? Again, like I said before, these big corporations, there are many other corporations too, but these big companies have money for your teaching ideas as well, not just for your research ideas. So Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, if you try to Google and go to their education funding sites or maybe research funding sites, they have grants for research. Sometimes these grants come in a way that you will be able to use it as their cloud credits, which is you have to use their cloud technology, which is you have to be online, you're creating something online, which is not a bad thing because you will need cloud in order to store your classroom files or maybe make videos and those kind of things. You can still try to use, get some funding and adopt to this kind of new ways of getting teaching and research funding. And these are not very hard to get. Research could be a little bit hard. Teaching funding, these kinds of teaching is actually quite easy. You have to go through some steps and get it. And these are not big money, but it might still give you some credits in terms of using those resources. That's it. And I'm ready to take questions now, if you have some questions for me. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ask their questions. It is a time of interaction. So please unmute and ask. So
Hello.
hello.
Hi.
Sir, I am Dr. Shahina Banu from Maharani Cluster University NSS coordinator. I want to ask you one question, sir. You were explaining, actually, I want to congratulate you first. Very good information about the researchers to the students about research. So first I would like to ask you, the Google research, no, sir. So if the simple way you send the videos to the students, how to reach to the Google research, it will be very good for the NSS students, sir. Because the NSS students are very active. Whatever the work we will give to them, no, they will do very well. So we can start even NSS volunteers research newsletters also. If they well versed in that software skills, sir?
I'm trying to understand your question. So do you want to, so your question is that you want to send videos to Google?
The Google research, no, sir, Google researcher, if some NSS students are trained in the Google research skill, they can bring the newsletters, NSS news research letters, sir.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm still trying to get your question. So do you want to train NSS students in Google research? So what was your question? Sorry, you can explain this a little bit. Try to unpack.
Actually, sir, if you send the very simple videos, how the NSS volunteer can make use of that one to enhance their skills in that field.
So you want me to send a video?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, I don't have a video right now with me, other than giving this talk, but you can connect with me later or someone in the NCC. I have my email ID in the first slide. I can go back to the first slide.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Please feel free to reach out to me anytime
Yes, sir,
on
yes,
this
sir.
email ID. Yeah, yeah, I'll be happy to help.
Yes, sir. I enjoyed your lecture, sir. I enjoyed your
Thank
lecture.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me as well. So.
Anybody else? Please unmute yourself and ask the questions. Somebody have raised hand.
Yes, thank you so much for such a wonderful speech, Mr. Yatish, and I really enjoyed it. And each and every words are really important for all of us, all the participants who really gone through it. Myself, Dinesh Naik, I am one of the NS and NCC cadets. I studied in Dr. Baliga College. Right now, I'm working at HPE in Bangalore. So in the beginning, I had seen the fundings and everything at what you have shared with us in India. So how much funding we have. At the same time, also you have explained how much funding is available in US. Now, so my simple question to you is, in case if somebody wanted to get into a research, okay, so how do they directly get into such things, or how can they get in touch with someone to get that fund release or get that research go on?
It depends on which, that's a good question, and it's nice to meet you. It depends on which stage you are in your research. So suppose if you are a PhD student and you want to get some research funding, it might be too early in terms of competition, because these research funds in the US, even though they are huge, they are actually very competitive. So researchers who are actually very well advanced and have really high profiles try to get these funds into their research projects. And so someone in India who is really at the start, their best chance is to actually either try to publish research papers first in international conferences and maybe publish in journals, and then try to collaborate as co-principal investigators. So they are not the main investigator, but actually to start off, you can actually try and collaborate with one of the researchers who have a good history of getting funding. And if you have good connections, and if they find you as a good resource, you can actually try to apply for funding as a co-principal investigator. So that's one of the ways you can get some research funding. The other ways is if you are a PhD student or you are a professor, you can also find postdoc opportunities or PhD opportunities in the US, depending on which stage you are in your research. They are usually funded by research grants too. You can find those professors or researchers who are working in that your related area by going to their profile and what kinds of research projects they are working on and what kinds of funding they have got. I'm not sure if I'm completely answering your question, but I probably am getting there. Is that something that's helpful to you?
Yes, thank you so much. That's really helps a lot.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So one question from the participant from Gaudet. How to find the journal related to our research topic?
Sorry, there was a vibration. I couldn't hear. Can you repeat? Can you repeat, please?
Okay. How to find journals which is related to our research topic?
So there are different ways, and the first, I think the first step that you can do in terms of finding research papers is go to Google Scholar, which is scholar.google.com, and put in a few keywords related to your research. Suppose you are doing gravitational wave, put gravitational wave in there. And then if you are doing some quantum physics, put quantum physics in there. It's going to bring, and Google Scholar is really good in terms of finding research papers. And it is going to find papers which are freely accessible, and some of them may not be freely accessible. So, for example, some IEEE papers, you might need some kind of membership to get those papers. But if you are at the start, you may not really need to read all kinds of papers, but you can actually start from papers which are freely accessible. I would say some percentage of them, at least 20-25% of the papers that you see in Google Scholar, at least, they will be accessible to you in terms of, and I'm not sure what kind of library facilities and services are available in India. So that's one way to get hold of these resources through libraries, which is generally these libraries in the US, if you have an account or a membership, if you are a part of the university, maybe it's also true in India. In some universities, they may have a library website where you get a membership, and through libraries, you can actually access all kinds of research papers. Generally, these research papers, even though you need a paid membership, libraries usually have actually pre-bought them. So that might be one way. But start with a Google Scholar if you are at the beginning, and you will find plenty of resources and research papers applicable to your field. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, sir. So
Think 1,000 times before take a decision, but never turn even if you got 1,000 difficulties. Yatish sir, thank you very much for your memorable words. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now I request who belongs to the both NSS and NCC, Mr. Manoj Shastri, to introduce invited speaker, Mr. Nagraj Bhatt.
Good morning, all of you. I am Manoj Shastri. I am one of NSS volunteer as well as NCC cadet. Today, I am very happy to introduce our guest, Mr. Nagraj Bhatt. Mr. Nagraj Bhatt has over 25 years of experience in information technology in multiple industries, such as startup, financial service, high-tech, semiconductor, life science, and medical device industries. Nagraj is currently serving as a director on the board of Baxter Innovations and Business Solutions Private Limited, a subsidiary of Baxter International Incorporated, which is a Fortune 500 multinational company and rank among the top 10 medical devices company in the world. Nagraj is joined Baxter in September 2016 as a director of Baxter IT Global Delivery Center in India and expanded his role in April 2018 to include management of the second global delivery center established in Mexico. Prior to joining Baxter, Nagraj Bhatt worked at Applied Materials India for over 13 years since its inception and had global leadership roles in IT, with his last position as a senior director of global information services. Nagraj is a medical and mechanical engineering and certified business continuity professional. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manoj Shastri. Now I request invited speaker, Mr. Nagraj Bhatt, Director, Baxter Invention and Business Solution, Private Limited, Bengaluru, on the topic, the brand called you. Sir, please.
All right. So good morning, everybody. Hope I'm audible enough for everyone. Greetings on the occasion of the Independence Day, which happened yesterday. And I know that the NCC and NSS have a large role to play in celebrating our Independence Day and in the area of servicing the nation. So I know that the NCC has a history dating back to the First World War, and NSS has been a forefront in doing a lot of social service. And I congratulate all of you for volunteering and taking that agenda forward. I think after a lot of loaded technology intensive talk from Yatish, I will touch upon a little bit of a lighter topic, and hopefully that will resonate with you in terms of the way that you can build your lifestyle skills. And the topic that I'm specifically talking about is a brand called you, or winning with your personal brand. So without further ado, let me get started. The four things that we're going to talk about today, essentially reinforcing the fact that each one of you is a brand. And then we talk about the building blocks of our brand. And then we talk about the fundamental laws that can build those building blocks. And then a few key handy tips, right? So we talked about a lot of big technology companies. I think Yatish mentioned about it. I think two of the companies that are out here is something probably familiar to all of you, right? They're US-based company, but very familiar companies in a lot of the nations around the world. So brand is an intangible asset. And when we go and buy certain things, we always have certain notion about that brand. And you are willing to pay a premium to buy that particular brand. Or if there are choices at the same price between two brands, you would pick the one with the highest trust, right? And I'll tell you a little bit about what the brand value really means. I mean, you may be astonished to hear Amazon, just its brand value is $315.5 billion, which means if they have to raise a loan, they can actually put Amazon brand, not the assets or anything like that, just the Amazon brand in a bank, and they will be able to get a valuation up to $315.5 billion. And that is the kind of value that is attached to the brand value. That's the kind of cost attached to the brand value, right? And Amazon is the company that has the highest brand value within the corporate companies around the world. And they have a market capitalization of about $1.577 trillion, and their 2019 revenue is $280.5 billion. But the brand value itself is $315.5 billion. And the second one that actually ranks in the global brand value is Apple, which is about 309.5. But I kind of took Google here. Google is ranking third in the global list of companies, right? With a brand value of 309, while their market capitalization is about $1.025 trillion, with a 2019 revenue of $160.74 US dollars. billions of US dollars. The reason I'm giving you this example of a corporate brand value is to delve into our topic of your personal brand and why you have to create your own brand so that you are marketable in the society, in the corporate sector, or in any other place that you want to make a mark for yourself, right? So we will use the chat window to have some interactions. I believe all of you know this gentleman who is on the screen. So when you go, when you think about Amir Khan, what are some of the things that comes into your mind? Please go ahead and start typing in your chat window. What would you think of Amir Khan? Amir Khan as a brand. So Amir Khan does a lot of shows in the Hindi TV, right? So the moment you think of Amir Khan, you think of him as a perfectionist, as a passionate, lives the role, creative and whatnot, right? So this is the value that he has created for himself. And similarly, here is this gentleman. I don't know how many of you follow him. His name is Arnab Goswami, who is an anchor and the chief editor of a news channel, a very popular English and Hindi news channel, right? So what do you think of Arnab Goswami? So you will notice that he's very aggressive. He shouts, oftentimes doesn't give the chance to his audience while he's anchoring and asking questions as many times as he answers versus he let his speakers answer. But he has the courage to take on anybody. And he is very ambitious. So you will create a picture in your mind when you talk about a personality, right? That is what your brand really resonates. And then finally, Shabana Ajmi, right? What comes to your mind when you think of Shabana Ajmi? Intelligent, a good actor, eloquent because she's able to make a mark, and Javed Akhtar because she's the wife of Javed Akhtar. And Javed Akhtar himself is another big personality, right? So each of these characters that you are seeing here are resonating themselves with certain characteristics. So that is where the whole conversation of our today's discussion, right? So branding and networking are two important things for you to grow in your career or as a person contributing to the society. And if you notice, the most richest people build networks. So they are creating a network of their own. They're able to leverage that network to do the right thing for their company, right thing for the society, and make a mark for themselves. And if you go to corporate after your graduation, or even while you're switching your jobs, if you're already working, most jobs are actually filled with the network. And they're oftentimes not advertised, or even if they're advertised, and if you are able to go through a network, the chances of your success is much higher. And most business decisions actually occur over lunch and dinner, right? And in fact, many of the US startups and unicorns were created with the discussion starting in Starbucks, which is a coffee shop chain, which is also now there in India. More and more you look the same, right? So all of us probably look the same. We probably have same names, right? With the Indian context, there are multiple people that have the same names. In fact, we are also saying that there are more than 7 people in the world that look alike. However, each one of us are very unique in the way that we present ourselves. When you go and get your Aadhaar, they'll ask you for your fingerprint. They'll ask you for your retina scan. No 7 people, even if they look alike, will not have the same retina scan pattern and the same finger prints, right? So that is because you're talking about differentiating yourself in a physical context. And similarly, you can differentiate yourself in the way how you think, behave, and recognize in the society or in the industry. So the point that I'm making with this conversation is raise your profile and build your brand. And it is not enough to be just brilliant and anonymous. In Canada, it's called as Elemare Kai, right? So you got to be brilliant, you got to be able to express, and you got to be able to contribute with your brilliance. That is where the communication matters. That is where having your point of view and express it perfectly makes a lot of difference in the way how you will grow up in your profession. So your personal brand is nothing but a value that you create for yourself, right? We are all in the profession of selling. Because unless you are able to identify your strengths, your areas of development, you are not going to be able to have your elevator pitch. So how would you be able to sell yourself in any place that you would like to shine? Is by building your own personal brand. You know, it gets your attention, it pays you respect, and it even pays you money. It is very important for each of us to figure out how we behave in every platform that is available to us, right? So, you know, many times people put enough of their pictures, comments on various social media channels, whether it's in Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and whatnot. And many posts have landed up with so many troubles. It actually helps you position as a thought leader in the subject matter of your choice. Ultimately, what makes you as a person is today correlated with several of your characteristics that are identified both physically and virtually through a lot of the social media interactions you have. So at the end, how do you build this product called me, right? So you are a product which has a brand value, just like Amazon has, just like Google has, just like Apple has. So how do you go about doing that? So we'll now talk about the building blocks of your personal brand, right? So obviously the most important one that we need to consider is the character or the values that you believe. So it differs from person to person, right? Values that I believe may be something that you may not believe, right? I mean, just a simple example, a vegetarian may think that non-vegetarian is not a so good thing, but for a non-vegetarian, it's a way of life, it's their food habit. But you have to imbibe a specific character which is considered to be the industry standard or a societal standard. And then you also need to have a competence. Oftentimes, we call this as IQ or an intelligent quotient. You need to be able to do your job, whether you are a researcher, whether you are a student, whether you are a professor, or whether you're working in the corporate sector. You got to have the right experience, you got to have the right skill, and then you are talented. There is a difference between being skilled and talented, right? The skill is something that you learn. Talent is how you are going to apply that skill to make the right outcome for whatever you are embarking on. And finally, the building block of this character and competence will help you build your personal brand and the reputation. As you all know, it takes a lifetime to build a good reputation and a second to destroy it. And we say that in Kannada, Kumbaranige Varsha Donnege Nimisha, right? So it is very important that we are able to carry ourselves as we go along with our personal brand and create a reputation for ourselves. And if you look at this from a pictorial representation, the vertical growth of the tree can be attributed in our personality trait as a competence, brand, and reputation. But only if you have a character and belief that is deep rooted underneath the soil, right? So your foundation is the character and belief, and on which you are able to build competence, brand, and reputation. I mean, just think about it. Even a terrorist has a belief, right? And a murderer has a reason to do the murder. And unless you are able to change the belief system, you're not going to be able to change the person. I think especially for the teacher, this is very important. If you're not able to change the belief system of your student, you're probably not going to change that person and change his personality. So the focus has to be about this belief system and build that values and character that we all embrace universally as a good trait to continue onwards. So we're going to talk about 6 fundamental ways in which we could build. But before we do, let us talk about how they are universal truths, right? So the 6 fundamental pointers that I'm going to talk about, they do not change with time, and they are fixed for everyone. So this means it's universal. It doesn't often change with time, and they always give the same result so long as you're able to strictly follow it. So the fact that it will work is based on the concept that you did not make, so you cannot break it, right? It invariably works if you follow. And those who follow will definitely succeed. So we all suffer from one of the 2 things, either the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. So the choice is ours, right? So we can make it or we can break it. Now, let's quickly start talking about what those 6 building blocks are, right? So the first one is discipline. I think all of us know here, right? So I don't think any of the sentences or any of the words that I'm talking about is new to all of you, because it's a very common word used in the dictionary. Let us look at it from the perspective of what the deeper meaning of each of those commonly simply used English words. I think it is to accept that success is inevitable for those who want it seriously, right? You've got to be serious about achieving something that you want to call yourself as successful. What is successful for me doesn't resonate the same way as it is for you. But ultimately, discipline is the bridge between your goals and accomplishments. So it is all about what needs to be done, as opposed to not what you like to do. And it is to seek feedback and act on it, right? So oftentimes we are hesitant to receive critical feedback. And if somebody critiques us, we are immediately withdrawing, right? We are going to negatively react to it and hastily comment about it. But think about feedback as a gift that one can get from the people, right? So a friend in need is a friend indeed, right? A friend will give you critical feedback, and he doesn't beat around the bush or give you a false sense of hope, right? So take the feedback and act on it, because at the end, it is for your benefit. And always hear what you need to, not what you like, right? So people often think that if they hear good news alone, it is good. So I kind of talk about one of the beautiful quote from one of our former chairmen, and he said, bad news is good news. Good news is no news, and no news is bad news, right? So the reason why we are saying bad news is good news, that means if you are able to understand something not going well early in the stage, you will be able to take action, correct it, and make yourself ready for the future. I mean, it is very similar to what we are seeing today in the corona pandemic, right? If you're able to detect early, you will be able to become healthy faster, boost your immunity, have the right food, and get over it. But if it is delayed, then you probably will need ventilators and oxygen and whatnot. So that is why bad news is good news. So take the action. Good news is no news. Good news is good. It is music to your ears, but don't get too much carried away with the success, right? So you're able to take the success and failure at the same level of stride and then get over it. And then the no news is bad news. Oftentimes people think that I've not heard anything, which means everything is going well. Everything is going well, which is not probably the case. So the fact that there are no news means that you're not getting the right feedback. And maybe after a period of time, you are going to be fully disengaged from whatever activities that you're doing if you don't hear for a long period of time. So follow up in those cases. And then the second thing is the passion. Passion is the most important element to build your brand, whatever you do. Do what you love, love what you do, right? And great success needs great effort. The success doesn't come by itself. And the passion fuels that heroic effort. And passion is highly infectious, right? I mean, if you look at our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he's there to do something new. He's trying to take bold steps. He's very passionate about the issues that are confronting India, right? So if you do have the passion, all else will follow. And that is why, especially in the corporate world, leaders hire for passion. So when you are in the interview conversation, if you show the passion, that is the number one thing that leaders look for. Because they know that they can train for skills and they can coach you for performance, right? So the passion is the number one thing that differentiates you versus the other. And passion by itself is going to pay off in the long run. The third thing is really the courage. So it is all about can-do attitude, right? You know, I can't do it versus I can do it. And courage is a resistance to a fear. A courageous man doesn't mean that he doesn't have a fear, but he has mastered the way to react to this fear, right? So courage is the only thing that will make you differentiate. And I think Yatish talked about a lot of the things that you can do in the world of research. And all of them are going to come from our ability to innovate. You know, that is why there is a difference between innovation and discovery. And people often talk about this research or finding new things or looking up and finding enough information, right? I think the common example that I can give you is a professor asked a student to differentiate between invention and discovery, right? And he kind of gave the answer, which is probably an easy way to describe. He said, my father discovered my mother and both of them invented me, right? Because my father and mother both are in this world. And father discovered, her mother married. And the child was born who didn't exist in this world, right? So the courage is really about thinking about making a step function change. Oftentimes we talk about continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is a way to increase a product or a service to a next level. But oftentimes it requires us to have a different mindset, which is a step function change versus incremental change. And if you talk, if you hear Narendra Modi, that is what he's trying to do, right? What India has not done over the 50 years period. He wants to leapfrog with the digital. In fact, he announced the digital health blueprint. And in fact, I was privy to read that blueprint and was able to provide some comments about the National Digital Health Mission, which is really about providing the digital identity for your health card. And think about the data that you can gather. And you know, today we all complain about doctor's prescription written on a piece of paper that can only be read by a pharmacist and nobody else, right? And now if you make all of them electronic health record, electronic medical record, and the use of technologies like artificial intelligence, it can actually become a pseudo doctor in a way. In fact, Dr. Devi Shetty, one of the renowned cardiologists, said that the doctor who uses AI, artificial intelligence, will replace a doctor who doesn't, while AI itself cannot replace a doctor, right? So there is a lot more way that we can use this powerful data to diagnose the problem, because many times people die not because of wrong treatment. People die because of wrong diagnosis of the issue that you have. If the diagnosis is done correctly, I think we can provide the right treatment. So there is a lot of way in which we can use the power of technology. And the courage really comes from that, because our Prime Minister is talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, and he's talking about not just making in India, but make in India for emerging markets, make in India for the globe. And all of that comes from the quotient of innovation. And oftentimes people are thinking that Indians are not so innovators. But if you really go to US and talk to a lot of these big companies and ask them to introduce them to the head of innovation labs, invariably 80 to 90% of the time they would be introduced to an Indian. And in fact, there is a professor called Professor Nirmalya Kumar, who was a professor in London Business School, and he was also an advisor to Tata board. He has produced a small video as a TED Talk. I mean, I would encourage all of you to go and take a look at it. And he talked about India's invisible innovation. And he did a study about why India is not producing the great products like an Apple iPhone or even a Viagra, right? Or a killer app or a killer product. But oftentimes we confuse innovation with the product innovation, but there are innovations of other kinds: process innovation, management innovation, framework innovation. And the amount of patents that were filed in India of a lot of these big companies were equivalent to that of filed in the US. And the researchers in India have equal opportunity compared to the researchers in the US. And I can talk about a lot of the big multinational companies here in India that are doing the same thing. And in fact, the quality of that paper is so high that in fact, this professor did a forward citation of those patents. The forward citation really is a way to identify if that patent was referenced in the subsequent papers, right? And he found that the quality was as equal and as good as the patents that were developed in the headquarters, right? So we are in a stage today in India where we can make a significant mark in the global front. And that is what requires us to take the courage. And the young generation of our people, especially the students coming out of the college, are going to be the one that will make it, right? Because oftentimes we call them as millennials or baby boomers, and they have gadgets as they started to go to schools. Unlike us, some of us who have studied in the government school, we didn't have access to a lot of technology for a long period of time. But I encourage and challenge all of the students here to take that plunge, make yourself technology savvy. I mean, even if you are in rural areas, these days you have access to a lot of technology with, the grand plan of fiber moving into a lot of the villages. So ultimately, you have to challenge yourself unnecessarily, right? Anything that is not broken, people think that it should not be challenged, but you should challenge, even if you think that things are not broken. There is no holy cow. All processes need to be challenged because that is the only way that you can make a difference. I mean, following the same discipline and consistency and expecting different results is not going to happen. If you want to achieve different results, you got to think differently and act differently. And ultimately, it's about what battles are worth fighting for, right? You are not going to take an extremely high risk, but you are actually taking a calculated risk. So you know where to draw a line, where to withdraw, and where to make an impact. And don't hesitate to take the unpopular stand, right? You have to hold yourself for what you believe the most and fight for it. And once the decision is made, obviously, you will go by whatever the decision is made as a team. But otherwise, don't take a popular stand, because oftentimes people do that for the sake of maintaining relationship, right? If I make a negative comment, or if my comments are considered to be offensive to other people, they kind of think back and don't put forward their points. But it is important to use those micro inequities to be able to provide that context and be able to advocate what you strongly believe in. And then the perseverance, right? Those who win the race are sometimes who stayed in it for a long enough time. And I think we all have heard the story of a tortoise, right? Slow and steady wins the race. So you have to have the confidence in you, never give up. And holding to a course of action, belief, and be able to live with it is very important. And you got to own your mistakes and learn from them, right? Oftentimes, you are smart if you are able to learn from the mistake of others. But if you are equally good, if you are able to at least learn from your own mistakes. And then you have to generate alternates infinitely, right? Coming to the point that what got us here will not get us there. So you have traveled a path, but the path that is out there next is much more complex, and it requires that perseverance. I mean, you don't get the result that quick, right? That is why in Mahabharata, Krishna said, right? Karmanye vadikaraste mafaleshu kadachanam. So you don't shoot for the purpose of success, but you do what you are supposed to do, and you will one day successful. And that is all about perseverance. And be able to take the pain, right? Because a lot of people today are going and starting their own company, startups, which is also encouraged by the government very much. And oftentimes the startup founders are going through so much of pain. In fact, many times they've pledged their homes and properties to pay their employees. I mean, even during the time of this pandemic, where they're not able to earn the money, but they need to feed their employees. But they are hoping for the best, and they are showing that perseverance. And one day they're going to be successful. So the fifth one is about inspire others. So, I mean, it's also about teamwork, right? You cannot succeed alone. You need others to make you successful. That is why we oftentimes in the industry talk about ecosystem connect. How can you use an ecosystem to multiply your effect? So you can make others work for you by leveraging the ecosystem. And we are talking about the digital India, right? And we in the industry call it as digital transformation. Everything is measured through the data, right? So data is the new oil. And data can be a powerful source of solving a lot of our challenges of the future, whether it is education, whether it is infrastructure, including electricity and power, and energy and environment. And all of that requires teamwork, collecting data, mining data, making sure that we are making data-driven decisions. Now, to inspire others is great, but to inspire is an honor. And if I'm doing that honor today, I'm so happy, right? So you have to inspire others because you cannot do it yourself. And you have to do it even when somebody is not watching you, right? And that is what comes through from this passion that I talked about earlier, right? If you know that somebody is watching you over their shoulder, you probably are going to be more diligent. But think of a time when you are not being watched and you are still doing the right thing. That is very, very important. but always convert one way to the two-way, right? So you have to be able to have that two-way conversation. It should be a feedback loop. And inspiring others will lead to innovation, right? And oftentimes we are caught up, as I mentioned in the previous slide, about incremental innovation versus step function change. Think of this picture here with an electrical bulb. We had lanterns in the past, and then we had the candles, which we use obviously oftentimes when you don't have electricity. But think about it, if our ancestors thought about the way to make a continuous improvement on a candle, will they be able to create an electrical bulb? The answer is no. To create an electrical bulb, you need to apply this strategic change or a step function change. And it didn't come from continuous improvement of candle, but it is really coming from that transformative innovation, which is what can happen when you inspire others and take them along your journey so they can contribute towards that. But also, because we have a lot of teachers and professors here, I'll tell you a story that I heard from one of my coach. And he said, in the past, the seniority equates to knowledge, right? If you are older, if you are senior, you are expected to be knowledgeable and a master in the subject. And he said, he was a world-renowned coach, and he said, I was talking to my son, and one day my son came and told me, Dad, I want to know why did the World War I started? And he was very happy. First time my son came to me and asking me something, because I am older, I'm knowledgeable, and that is why I'm knowledgeable, so I have an understanding of what happened with World War I. And then as we started speaking about the origin of World War I, his son said, Dad, you are boring. I will go and look up in the internet. So now the internet has made information very pervasive, right? So today, that is why a seniority and age doesn't equate to knowledge. And I am 25 years in the industry, but I oftentimes take the opportunity to get reverse mentored by the students that are coming out of the college. There's so much knowledge about the newer technology nuances and how they can be applied, whether it is data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, deep learning, neural network, things like natural language processing, right? All of the ones that make a human being equivalent using the software robots. Now, it is important to have a curiosity, right? Whether you are a teacher, whether you are a student. That is what makes us a continuous learner. And that is why the inspiring others matters, and with that two-way communication. And then finally, the measuring the results, right? So success is a number, and do not fool yourself. Please measure those parameters that you believe in, that you are able to drive the outcome. And metrics energize and engage. It becomes it's more like a compass, right? It guides you to your goal post. And metrics are early warning signs and systems. You're able to get a clue from early issues so you can take the right actions, and measure yourself relentlessly and mercilessly. Always hold yourself accountable to the role model that you look up to, right? Oftentimes we say that when it comes to knowledge, you have to look up to people that are more knowledgeable than you, right? So that means you look up to the richer in the knowledge. But when it comes to happiness and money, compare yourself to the poor, than you. And life is a math, right? So 2 plus 4 is equal to 6. But remember, you can only change one side. And if you change 2 to 3, it becomes 3 plus 4, and the 7 you cannot change. So right-hand side you cannot change. If you change the right-hand side, you got to change the left-hand side. So what gets measured gets managed. I mean, in the corporate world, we say that what gets measured and rewarded gets done. Right? That is the way how we look at in the HR world in the corporate sector. So that is why only what you can measure exists. What is not existing, you cannot measure, obviously. And we covered these 6 building blocks. You know, these are seemingly common English words from the dictionary, but we kind of discussed more in depth about what it really means in creating a personal brand for yourself. But I'll also talk a little bit about this mindfulness for agility, right? So the agility today is a very important aspect. In the past, we said cheaper, faster, and better. Now we are talking about agility, precision, and accuracy. And those are the 3 words replaced by faster, cheaper, and better. So in order to do that, the very important life skill that we need to have are the 3 elements that I call as IQ, EQ, and MQ. I'll talk about each one of them a little bit in greater detail. On the left-hand side, you see this iceberg, which you will see in the ocean. So the iceberg has 10% of its physical form available above the sea level, and 90% is beneath the sea level. So the iceberg floats in the ocean because of its undercurrent, which is invisible below the waterline. So the 10% is only visible, right? And we call this 10%, which is above the waterline, is called as IQ. I hope that a lot of you understand what is IQ, right? Intelligent quotient. And that IQ is nothing but in the context of your ability to get your job done. And if you are a professor, you are studying the material beforehand and go to school and deliver your lecture with the subject matter expertise, right? In the corporate management, quality management, tracking deliverables, managing risk, estimating the effort that is required to deliver a particular project. So it's all about, do you have the right skill? Do you have the right education? Are you going to be able to deliver what is assigned to you? They're all about IQ. And if you look at the IQ, we call it as a management aspect. It is a hard skill. It is what you learn when you are in school or when you are learning through online and other media, right? And it deals with the topic of what. And usually the IQ is something that can be developed through the training, by education, by learning, and by getting taught by your colleagues or your peers. And then the second aspect, which is the 90% that is beneath the waterline, is what we call as EQ, emotional quotient. If you are successful, if you want to be successful in the competitive world and the globalized world, you need more EQ than IQ. IQ is given. You can't get in any place if you don't have the IQ, right? If you are not a qualified person according to the requirement of your job, you're not there in the company or you're not in the institution. But what makes you differentiate compared to others is the EQ. And EQ is all about leadership, not management. And EQ comes through a lot of the undercurrent that I mentioned in the 90% below the waterline, which is about the team dynamics, the undercurrent. And I'll give you an example of an air, right? We don't see the air. But if there is a bad smell in the air, we recognize it, right? So it is like this. So you will be able to understand what is happening underneath your team structure or your social circle. You will be able to experience it, right? So it all deals with delegation, empowerment, motivation, communication, coaching, and influencing. So the leadership aspect is about the soft skills. It deals with how versus the what. And EQ is typically not taught through a training, but EQ is something that can come through the coaching. It is all about sharing experiences. It is all about discussing what is the art of the possible. And then finally, the new dimension is really the mindfulness quotient. And it is so much important because the Western world today have taken the meditation, the yoga, and all of those aspects that was very Indian in nature as a way of life. So that is why we call it as mindfulness at work and mindfulness at home. It's all about balancing your life in a manner that resonates with your happiness. So the mindfulness is not hard, it is not soft, it is subtle. It is very difficult to really recognize, but it is all about being aware, right? It's not dealing with what or how it is dealing with your awareness. And the mindfulness quotient is about self-inquiry. It is your internal diagnosis. And it's also, oftentimes people call it as inner engineering. Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev talks about this inner engineering courses to discover yourself. And this awareness is really coming through these three thoughts about perceive what you hear, process them in your mind, and then perform. There are various techniques for building mindfulness. And one of the most popular one that I personally like is a concept called breath watching. And it's available if you Google or YouTube, right? The technique of breath watching. By just doing this small activity, you're able to control, you're able to forget what is happening surrounding you for a moment of time. And that will help people, especially in the Corona pandemic time, when the work and life is integrated and amalgamated. In the past, we used to talk about work-life balance. Now we are talking about work-life integration. You never know when the work starts and when the non-work life-related activity starts. So now let's go back very quickly, right? Because I think we're a little bit of behind schedule. Starting today, my ask and recommendation, develop your reputation. Do what you say you will do. Provide the honest and constructive feedback. Don't hesitate to provide a sugar-coated feedback, right? Be direct, be able to provide a critical feedback. Support and collaborate effectively and develop that courage. Be trustworthy. And I'll play a very quick video, and I would appreciate if you put in the chat window, what would you see the characteristics from this video? What comes to your mind when you see these two videos? Don't worry about the voice because it's more of a music. Just watch. Okay, so now we have seen the play by these two folks, right? So now we will see the next video. Yeah, so I think the message is loud and clear, right? Embracing the teamwork. In the first video, you see a heroic action, but you have to understand that all of us are not heroic, right? But how will you produce the best effort, right? And the best outcome. So no one thing is as important as doing it together. And there is a whole happiness if you all do it together versus trying to do it ourselves. Right? We all recognize that each one of us has a weakness and each one of us has a strength. If you're able to bridge the weakness of one person with the strength of the other person, you produce the great teamwork and great outcomes. And that is where the whole point comes down to, which is the whole is greater than the sum of its part. As you have seen in the second video, we were able to see a marvelous outcome, visually appealing, with this forming of a different structure by the human chain and the human bodies, right? I think that is what we need to really focus on. And then finally, network and relationship, right? So there is a relationship map that possibly you can use to identify what others expect of you from these relationships. If you have a mentor-mentee relationship or a sponsor-sponsor relationship, have a clear expectation of what each others want from the other. And you have obviously multiple stakeholders as part of your 360 process, your colleagues, your customers or suppliers who receive your output. I think to the point that Yatish made earlier, that teachers need to look at the students as your clients, right, as your customers, because whoever receives your output becomes your customers. And who are going to use the information that you provide becomes your customers. So there are multiple dynamics and you agree on a rules of engagement. That way you are able to meet the expectations and be able to meet those commitments. And then finally have your elevator speech, right? So obviously elevator is nothing but a way to step up, right? An alternative to the historical ladder. And it is really about a quick introduction of you. What are you good at, and leverage your experience, and what can you do? I mean, if you just think about an insurance advisor, right? He will relentlessly work with you to try and sell you an insurance policy. And then oftentimes it is said that insurance policies are sold, not bought. So what that means is he's going to come up with an elevator pitch as to why you would buy that insurance policy and how good it is for you. And he exemplifies this whole notion of what an elevator pitch looks like. But that elevator pitch is very important for you because, as I mentioned earlier, in a brand called you, just like an insurance advisor, you are selling your brand. You're selling yourself in wherever you are in your profession. And then your richest resources are in your richest relationship, right? Make use of your mentors and get ideas, conference, have discussions that will improve your way of approaching life, right? We call it as constructive confrontation that you need to be able to have with your trusted friend, which also means that it is about healthy conflicts. Right? Don't shy away from having that healthy conflict. And then authenticity is very important. Be genuinely interested in others if you hope to be interesting to others. So it's a two-way street, right? So it is important that you be authentic. And ultimately listen. You have to listen twice when you speak. Because everyone appreciates the one who listens well. And you've got to be able to have this childlike curiosity, right? To the point that I mentioned earlier, it is important and be open to be reverse mentored, right? Even if it means that you are learning from your juniors, you're learning from your students. I think we have to have a childlike curiosity for the lifetime. And finally, there are two good ways to raise your profile, right? Speak or write. which is the way to get you, to help you climb the ladder. And then I think it's a great point to talk about in the forum of NSS, because the NSS is all about National Service Scheme, and it is all about give versus take, right? So you, in a process of building relationship, people oftentimes think that it is all about take, but it is not that, right? It is about give and take. And the greatest gift that you can give someone is your time, your attention, your love, and your concern. And be yourself. Don't be someone else. Just be you. So two kinds of people, right? Those who seek ways to succeed and those who talk why they can't succeed. So it's very important that you take the path of, it's not about complaining. It's not about thinking all the barriers and say why I'm not successful. That is why we always say that put all your constraints on the table first, and then work your way to resolve them as opposed to complaining all the time. And everything that you do or choose not to do is communicate your brand value and character. That is what makes the foundation that can take you to the next level. And ultimately, we can talk a lot. We oftentimes say that in a corporate world, strategy and planning is 10%, but 90% is execution. It is easier said than done. It is important to give the lecture. It is important to speak about the conceptual world, but it is hard to implement it. That is why 90% is really about execution. And that execution should be focused based on focus, passion, and speed. I think this is my last slide. I hope it resonated with you. And again, all the best and wish you all the success. So over to you, Vinayak, if there are any questions or interactions.
Now the time of interaction. Participant interact with our guest, Mr. Nagaraj Bhatt sir. Please.
Anybody wants to ask their queries, so please ask at this time. Please unmute and ask. If you have any questions, please unmute and ask. So if anybody wants to ask the questions.
Yeah, it's good to hear either you have understood everything or you already knew what I did talk about in this session, right?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Runner says it is possible, but risk. But winner says it is risk, but possible. So work hard and achieve your target. Sir, thank you very much for your precious speech. Thank you, sir. Finally, I request NSS Program Officer of our college, Professor Vinayak Bhatt, to give vote of thanks for this morning session. Sir, please.
Okay, I am Vinayak Bhatt, NSS Program Officer from Dr. Vinayak College of Arts and Science. We are very much pleased to host this webinar at Dr. Vinayak College of Arts and Science, Kumta. We brought two eminent resource persons, Mr. Yatish Hegde from academic background and Mr. Nagaraj Bhatt from industry background. We are sure that the participants are immensely benefited from the resource persons. I submit my thanks to Dr. M.B. Dalapati, Program Coordinator, NSSL Karnataka University, Dharwad, for his inaugural address and encouragement. I am immensely thankful to Mr. Yatish Hegde, Tulane University, New Orleans, USA, for accepting our invitation and for delivering talk on exploring the resource for effective teaching and research. Thank you, sir. My sincere thanks to Mr. Nagaraj Bhatt, Director, Baxter Innovations and Business Solutions Limited, for accepting our invitation and delivering motivational talk on the topic, the brand called you, that is creating our personal brand. So thank you, sir. My sincere thanks to Principal Dr. S.M. Chetty to preside over the seminar and deliver this message. Thank you, sir. Finally, I thank all the participants and delegates across the country and several parts of the world like USA, Singapore, Hong Kong, United Kingdom, Sri Lanka, etc. I request all the participants to attend the evening session also, and the participants will give oral presentation, so which will start from 2 o'clock. And the feedback link will be provided at the end of evening session at the chat box only. So I request all the participants please to be present at 2 o'clock, and already the Zoom link will be sent to the WhatsApp group, that is NSS and NCC webinar. So in that WhatsApp group, you can see the Zoom link for the evening session. So please join the evening session. Thank you all. And it will be live on YouTube also. Thank you, sir. So may I end the session? So please be joined at 2 o'clock. Thank you. Thank you one and all. So I will end this session. So please cooperate in the next session also. Thank you.